For 26 years, I've had the privilege of walking alongside women and helping them rebuild their lives. And that's where I ended up in the place that I'm in right now. I have sat across from lots of victims and survivors. I have been a rape counselor, I am a biblical counselor, and I am a master life coach. And all of this for women after they have gone through trauma. I want to thank my friends at Compassion Washington. I am not only blessed to partner with you, but so very proud of your hard work, and so grateful that you continue to do it in season and out of season and for the glory of our Lord. Because that is the most important thing to me. I would not be standing on this stage if it wasn't for him. And when I heard Christine talk from More Love, I thought, oh, she's my sister. I have to talk to her because I shouldn't be here in front of you because I'm a little girl who comes from a very hard background. And many people thought that I would amount to nothing. In fact, when I was 11 years old, I had a grown woman look at me and say, your mother is a whore, and all you'll ever be is a whore. I was 11 years old. I still remember the color of her shirt, where we were standing, and I didn't even know what a whore was, but I looked it up. I looked it up. In those days, you looked things up in the dictionary. We didn't have Google. I am a mother of 3 children. They are 28, 30, and 43. I had my first child when I was 16 years old because I didn't have a compass at home. I didn't have a role model. And because of that, I ended up in places that I should not have been. I'm going to put this down because I'm just going to talk. No, I'm going to keep it. I'm just going to talk to you about that. But I established unveiled bridal veils because I believe that whatever you have in your possession is what you are supposed to use in order to make a difference. No one in this room has an excuse for not making a difference. You took the time to show up here. When you leave here, I want you to show up for them because that's what we're here about. I don't believe in just talking. I believe that when you talk about something, you should walk it out. And my grandmother used to say, be worth your salt. And from a very young age, I determined that I would be worth my salt because the things that I needed when I was growing up, I didn't have. But because the Lord picked me up from where I was and gave me a hope in the future, I have an obligation to Him first and second to them. I like to say that I am a professional treasure hunter. I titled myself that when I spent a decade in Snohomish County courthouse advocating for women. And I'm going to tell you how I got there. I started a nonprofit called Proverbs 31:20. And my job was to help women rebuild their lives, give them life skills, help them learn to do the things that their mothers and fathers didn't learn to do. But I started to see something, a trend. There was something going on with some of the women that I was helping, and they were all from homeless shelters. But I didn't have that peace until one day. And I want to tell you the story of, I'll call her S, and I have her permission. I had been doing my work for about 9 years, and one day, one of my clients showed up to my office without an appointment, and she had a young woman with her. And I'm going to call her S. And I wasn't expecting what happened that day. But what it showed me is that I was not equipped to do the very work that I set about doing. I sat across from this young woman, and immediately I heard the Lord say, don't tell her about the Bible. And I thought, well, that's strange. I tell everybody about the Bible. But I heard God clearly, don't tell her. And so I invited her to sit down, and I asked her to tell me her story. And what she told me was, Her mother had gotten, and she was, by the way, she was 19 at the time that I met her. But when she was 14 years old, her mother remarried, and they had 2 children, and pretty soon, S found herself outside of her family. She didn't feel like she belonged there, but she had a very sweet friend and her mother that she knew through Sunday school. And so she went to their house, and her idea was, if I'm not wanted at home, I can go stay with my friend. And she was received with warmth and love into this home. She's 14 years old. She lives with them for about a year, and her friend was a year older. Her friend went to went to college early, and the day she left, this friend's mother said to S, "You need to start paying your way." And she began to traffic her. And I understood, it still brings tears to my eyes. I understood why God said, don't tell her about your Bible. Because this woman was a predator and she was in the church. She met her in the church and she turned her out onto the streets. She didn't trust people in the church because a predator met her in the church. And I sat and I talked to S that day, but what she told me was she was sold night after night. And she finally got away because someone helped her. And when she came to my house, she had only had her freedom for 2 weeks, and she found out she was pregnant. And that's how I met her. But sitting across from her changed my life, because as I said to you, I believe that when something is in front of you, you act on that thing. You do what you have with what you have. Here I am teaching life skills, and now I have a young woman who needs life skills, but I can't even begin to give her life skills because she has so much trauma from 15 to 19 being sold night after night. And I realized I didn't have the education I needed. She was going through court, and she did not understand the forms. And see, here's something that I understand. It is very hard when you don't understand what's going on around you, and yet you have to be part of what's going on around you. So she had been forced into criminalization, because if she did not, there was a beating. There were things going on that forced her to sell drugs, that forced her to commit crimes, and she had been arrested, and she had a record. But one of the things I realized that I could do for her, and this is where I became an advocate. I didn't know anything about the court system, but I am smart. God has given me a brain, and I can figure out complex things. I started attending court with her, and after that, I attended court with other women. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a paralegal. I had no legal background, but I know how to do research, and I know how to solve problems. And at the time, that was what I could give her. So I sat with my clients, all of the ones who were in the court system. I read documents. I broke down complex things, and when I didn't understand, I called people who were smarter than me that did. But I didn't leave them by themselves. Some of you are sitting here today, and you are wondering, what is it that I can do? What's my part? And I'm asking you today, what do you have? What did God already put in your possession? You don't need anything else. You need courage. You need commitment. And you need to be faithful. You need to show up where you say you're going to show up. And even if you didn't say you're going to show up, if you see a young woman or a young man who is caught in this, you show up for them. I didn't have much as a little girl. My family had all kinds of problems, more problems than solutions. But what I did have was courage. And Christine talked about that earlier. I don't know where it came from, but I had it. And so after spending all of that time in court, I had some health problems. I had marital problems, and I stepped aside from that, and I walked away to do a few quiet things. And this is where my bridal industry comes in. I thought, I need to have a little bit of time where I can have a sabbatical from the hard work. I'm just going to take time away. But I opened a formal wear boutique in Harbor Point, Washington. But a woman like me knows that at some point, somebody might walk in that needs support. So I strategically made my dressing rooms in front of what was actually an office door that went out the back way. Because let me tell you, if someone comes to me for help, I'm going to be ready. I'm not going to wait until they need help. I'm going to prepare in advance to be help. My team was trained that if a woman came in the door and she was in distress and she was with a male and we saw any kind of manipulation going on, we were ready. Lynette, you said we have to work together. In order to work together, we have to stay ready. We have to be alert to what's going on. Lynette, you talked about how old should they be when we tell them. I started talking to my daughter when she was in 3rd grade because I met S. There are ways that we can talk to children without robbing them of their innocence. And people said, oh no, you shouldn't tell her, she'll be afraid. That's a lie. That's a lie. We set our children up to be victims when we don't tell them the truth. And not only did I tell her about it in a way she could understand, I said, someone may one day say, if you do this, if you don't come, if you tell, I'm going to hurt your mom, I am going to do something to your house. And I told her, don't believe them. I might be a woman, but they don't want to meet me. Okay? So I had taken this time off, and since then I have sat across from many women who have been trafficked. And I think it was Susanna that you talked about the trauma bonding. And I want to say something to you. Trauma bonding is a dangerous thing. It sets a victim up to lie and protect the person that's hurting her. And right now in my current job, I interview women to come into a job readiness program, and I can't tell you how often I've sat with some of them and they have said to me, my best friend is this, or my partner is the person who supports me, but I dig deep. I start asking, so what does support look like? I'd love to know how he supports you. And by the way, traffickers are women too. They're teenage girls and they're teenage boys. Sometimes they're older women and older men. But inevitably in these interviews, what happens is the breakdown of the story. Because I think there is something in us that wants to hear the easy answer. We don't want to hear that somebody is being trafficked. We don't want to hear that they're being hurt at home. And so when they say the thing, we think, oh, great. But we're setting them up to continue to be violated. One of my clients was 13 years old when her father started trafficking her. When she came to meet me, she was 28 years old, and I was interviewing her for the program. And as I'm talking to her about her life, I see her body just go rigid. I'm not a woman who is all about business. So I put my paperwork down and I leaned into her. And I said, can I tell you a little bit about my life? And the reason why I did that is when women are hurting, they sometimes think the people that are helping them have all the answers. They think just because you're all cleaned up, it's always been so easy for you. They think a person like that will never accept me. I will never be good enough. And so I shared with her from my childhood, And as I shared with her, her eyes welled up and I thought, now we can have a conversation. Now you and I are meeting on level ground. We can have a conversation. She went through the program. The program I run is 16 weeks long. And in the middle of that program, she said, all my life, all I've ever done is sell myself. And she said, but because of this program, for the first time in my life, I am living a life that I can be proud of. This is the work of advocacy. This is what I love. It's what I breathe. And last year, I thought, what can I do? Because I've worked behind the scenes for so long, donating, volunteering, advocating. What can I do? And I decided I am going to take my bridal experience and my advocacy experience, and I am going to marry them. I'm going to create something called Unveil It Bridal Veils. And I am going to establish the Unveil It Fund, so 25% of every single sale will go to fight sex trafficking in some way or to rebuild the lives of women. So this is how I plan to stay in this movement. I'm going to grow this. My daughter is actually sitting on the advisory board. And I want to tell you something that came out of me sharing and educating her about trafficking, because I think it is so important that we equip our students. As she got older, I continued to have more conversations with her about what trafficking was. When her friends came to the house, I had conversations with them too, because it's important that students understand this. My daughter went off to college, and one morning at about 6 a.m., I pulled my phone up and I had about 20 messages from her. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the worst. I'm thinking it's something with her, and I call her back, and she's in California. And she says, have you seen Instagram? And I said, not yet. She said, Mom, I'm reading messages from a girl that we knew. It was a family friend's daughter. She was 16 and in high school. And she said, Mom, please look, I think she's being trafficked. Now, this comes from a girl who, from the time she was in 3rd grade, now she's in college, and she's had all of the awareness education. And I get on, and I see the messages, and they have all of the signs. So I call this girl's mother, and she said, we don't know who she's with, but she left last night. We're trying to find her. And I remembered when this child was 14 years old, she was very attached to my daughter, who was then in high school. And she also really loved me, and I asked, would you mind if I reached out? And she said, please. And I stopped and I prayed. I said, Lord, use these old relationships and just let her answer the phone. And she answered. And she said, I asked her, hey, what are you up to? She said, oh, I'm with my boyfriend, and we're going to go on a road trip. I said, do your parents know? She said, I'm just going to go. And I said, well, did you leave the house with what you needed? She says, well, he has all the money that we need. And I said, now, Lauren, you know what Miss Elizabeth says. You need to have your own money. I said, where are you? And she told me where they were. I said, do you think I could just come? I'm just going to give you some cash for the road. And immediately, her phone went dead. And I thought, oh. So I started texting her, and she texted back. She wouldn't answer the phone call, but I said, can I come and see you? She said, actually, we're leaving now. And then she forgot she had geotags on her phone. Now, I didn't even know what a geotag was, and I don't know if they use them anymore. But what it is the kids take a picture where they are, and it tells you where they are. That's what a geotag was. And so my daughter was her friend on Instagram, so she could see her geotags. And she says, Mom, I think they're going to LA. and my daughter was in California. So I'm praying what to do, and I reach out and say, hey, are you by any chance going to California? And she's still on her cell phone texting. And she said, we might stop there. And I said, Winter would love to see you. Do you think you could just stop by and say hi to her? She hasn't seen you forever. And so she says, I'll ask. And sure enough, he says, we're going through there only for a minute. And because my daughter is a college girl and not a threat, he says they're going to stop. And so I give Winter the information, and Winter says, let her know I'm going to meet her at this particular place. And they actually went there. And I had to betray my daughter. I'm just going to tell you, she's sweet and she's smart, but she's not enough for traffickers. But anyway, what happened, they showed up at the location. We had called the Highway Patrol and the LAPD, and we were back and forth with them. And they said, we don't see your daughter's car here. I'm explaining her car, and I'm thinking, she's there. And finally she says, I'm not by myself. She was with her boyfriend. So I give them that information, and about a half hour later, I get a call from my daughter. She said, did you call the police on us? And I said, well, I had to. She and her boyfriend, as they're meeting this young girl and the trafficker, 35, my daughter counted them, law enforcement officers swoop in there with their weapons. And my daughter said, Mom, it was so crazy. She said, they were saying, hands up, and all of a sudden they said, are you Winter? So I'm telling you this informing kids of what they need to know produced that. Had I gone with the wisdom of some people who say, you'll scare them unnecessarily, my daughter would not have been equipped to see what was happening right before her eyes. As a community, we not only have to be smart, but we have to equip students to be smart, and we have to equip littles. When my daughter was in third grade, I said, if anybody ever takes you or tries to, you have my permission to tear the skin off of them and make as much noise as you can. Because if someone says, be quiet and I won't hurt you, it actually means they're going to hurt you. So you better hurt them first. So I empowered her. I did not scare her. So I am grateful for the opportunity to do the work that I do, but I want to encourage you, if you're an everyday person here today and you're wondering, what can I do? I go back to tell you again, you do what you do with what you have. Sometimes we think, first I have to do this and this and this. Show up. And then secondly, if you know brides, I would love to have their business, because I would love for their veil to unveil the darkness of trafficking and illuminate the path to justice. Because I am here for it. I am here for women to rebuild their lives no matter where they are. And I am unafraid because I belong to the one who does the most. And I know for a fact that if he is in me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. So thank you so much for letting me share with you today. And thank you for being here today. But do something with all this information that you are getting.
Hope, health, and healing. Compassion Washington.